This is Genesis 36 and 19. These are the sons of Esau, who is Edom, and these are their dukes. Shalom, Kahala Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Ruach Kodash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect with the house of David reborn again in this generation. And shalom to the 1/3 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to discuss the first official photo for King Charles III, since he's come out and to become the King of England in 2022. Right? The photo you're looking at now is a mirrored image, and it shows something very striking. Now, leaders of the world tend to have their portraits painted and then displayed to the world, and there's a lot of esoteric meanings behind them. And in the realm of Satanists, or should I say occultists, people who look back towards the old world mystery schools and use that knowledge, or basically witches, they use something known as mirroring, okay, where they will hold up a mirror, or they'll take an image and they'll project it next to itself, hence mirroring it, to reveal a hidden truth. And in this image here, not only does this have a trait of Edom, that being, red in color, because again, when you get into the Bible, the name Edom means red. Okay, let's actually get this right. This is from the Blue Letter Bible. We're going to break down the words. It says, this is Genesis 25 and 30. It says, and Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. Okay, and how do we go to Edom? Right, when you click on tools, go all the way to the bottom. Look, it's every word, right? It tells you. There you go, right? Edom. H123.
Strong's H123. Edom.
Alright, it tells you, it says Edom equals red. Edom, Edomite, Idumean, descendants of Esau, land of Edom, Idumea, land south and southeast of Palestine. So, that being said, when you get into this image, it's obviously red in color, right? The artist was definitely trying to send out a message, but you could clearly see a demonic figure here in the center. Okay, now when you go into the comment boards, a lot of people have been making adjustments of this image, and people have found this figure here, this demonic figure. And let's actually look at some images which were adjusted by the comment boards. You can see here's more of a demonic feature. This looks like a goat face here. Also, this bigger thing here is also a goat face, but it could be a goat face. This is the chest, right? This would be like that snake. I forgot, the caduceus is what they call it, I believe, right? Where the spiraling snake and stuff. And what that's ultimately going into is the Baphomet, right? Because these people here, they worship Baphomet, okay? And Baphomet isn't a demon in itself, but what it is, it's an amalgamation, a collection of all these satanic images and doctrines and nuances all put together, right? Transsexualism, ambiguousness, the left wing, right wing, all these type of things, right? The veneration of the goat, right? Which is something that the Bible shows to be representation for the 2/3 and the rejected, right, of the peoples. Well, these devils here, you got to remember, their god is Satan. Okay, and what they got to do, just like we do, where we have to, worship and venerate our Lord, Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, these devils on the left hand have to venerate their God on the left hand side, right? And if they don't, they then get punished, they get cursed. Okay, so by doing things like this, making mirror images where it shows an embedded image of Baphomet, this is worship or veneration to their God. Okay, and also this shows how they reveal things to the public, right? It's there in plain sight, but you have to look deeper into it to understand. Now, another thing to note: some people are going to say, "Oh, this is reaching that, by changing things around, you can make anything look bad and stuff." Well, that's true and whatnot, but there are spiritual traits that take place which cannot be controlled, that they just happen to be manifested, and that's because of the spiritual significance of the event. A good example of this is backscattering, which is where you take a record and you play it backwards and it reveals like a hidden message. Now, a lot of people believe that these artists out there, they actually try to hide these messages in what they're saying, but it's explained by Satanists that this isn't what they are doing, but that the subconscious mind, the way it lays out sentence structure and inflection, what it does is that by playing it backwards, certain words and phrases are revealed, and hence it's more of a spiritual manifestation of what's really behind what's being said, right? And so just like backscattering, this painting here can simply be a manifestation of the spiritual entities behind this devil and the Edomite nation. Okay, this could be a reason, why the artist, for some reason, just happened to use very heavily red, a color scheme on this portrait. Okay, this is why it may have caused him to lay a little heavier on the paintbrush on the left hand side, which would create this skull image. Okay, because again, there's a lot of spiritual things at play here that you got to take note of. But overall, that being said, regardless if this image of this Baphomet is intentional or coincidence, it's spiritual either way. And that being said, this isn't modified, right? You can see how it all just blends in. There's no harsh lines like as if it's been edited, right? And here's another image. Again, it could be a skull here. It could be, this is the skull, this is the body. But the point being is this is what people are showing. And when you get into the Bible, like I said, red is synonymous with these Edomites, and that's because these devils who are ruling the world had this spiritual trait put upon them, right? And we can read about this here when Esau, right, the progenitor of these Edomites, which is the biblical name for the Caucasian race in the world, first came upon the scene. Okay, this is Genesis 25 and 25, and the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau, right? And Esau, in his name in Hebrew, means wasted away, right? But the term here is, that I wanted to note is that, again, the term red is being brought back around with Esau, right? And Apostle Kabar goes into a breakdown of the word scarlet and how ultimately that, denotes, like a criminal. And these devils, that's them, right? Because, again, when you get into Esau and who he was actually Cain, who came back in the reincarnation, hence why he came out red. Why? Well, because he had his melanin taken away when he was Cain. That's how the Lord marked Cain. And then later on, because it was a spiritual mark, something that came upon him, right, and manifested physically in his skin, when he came back as Esau, right, as we read here, he came out with no melanin, right? He came out with that same curse that was upon Cain, and now is upon Esau and all his descendants, right? And how do we know who his descendants are? Well, let's go ahead and read the book from the descendants of Esau, and let's let them tell us who the Edomites are today. So this is one of the two books I'm going to show you. This is from a book called Who is Esau Edom? And when you get into this book, it's I don't know if it still is, but back in the day it used to be fairly expensive to get, but you can easily get the PDF file now. And in this book here, you basically have Esau or Edom being described as the so-called Israelis. All right, let's go down. We'll just cut to the chase right here. Right, it tells you. Right, it says map showing the distribution of religions in Europe in the 10th century. Right, basically 900 AD which is the year that the Russians destroyed the Amalekites, right, the so-called Jewish people, and drove them out of their land called Zaria, which is right here. But if you look here, right, it tells you, it says Jews and then Khazars, right here. And it tells you, it says the Khazars were a nomadic people who had no traces of Hebraic culture. They had been following a pagan and sex-oriented religion until they had officially embraced Judaism in 740 AD. While rejecting Christianity and Mohammedanism, basically Islam, the Jewish author and historian Arthur Koestler also concludes that the majority of the East European Jews, and hence the world Jewry, is of Khazar and not of Semitic origin. Now this here is wrong because the Khazars are ultimately not Japhetic in nature. They don't come from from Japhet. They do come from Shem, but they come from Esau and not Jacob. Okay, so they are they are Semitic, but they're not Israelites. Okay, they are not the chosen people. And it says, in the beginning of this book, he states, the large majority of the surviving Jews in the world is of Eastern European and thus perhaps mainly of Khazar origins. If so, the world means that their ancestors came not from the Jordan but from the Volga. And again, ultimately they're not Japhetic, so this is wrong. But again, Arthur Koestler was close. Okay, he got half of the truth. The other truth is found in another book, right? The Roman Empire, the Empire of the Edomite by William Beeston, right? In his book, he basically brings out the truth, right? That they found that the Romans were founded by the Edomites, right? And it goes here and it tells you, says, the Romans came from Esau, who is Edom, and Italy is the Idumea, Rome the Basra of the Hebrew prophets. Okay, so that's who these people are, and these are their own books and their own history writings. So the fact that, like the beloved elder Malcolm has said, right, Esau is being revealed. The son of perdition is now being shown to the world who they are, and the world is seeing the fruits of their labor. Okay, and this here is just another spiritual sign that the Lord is bringing out, so that way you could see who are the sons of perdition. Now, a lot of people are gonna get it twisted and think that King Charles is the Antichrist and that he's the one that everybody got to watch out for, but he's just one of many Antichrists. Okay, the whole nation of Edom, those are the Antichrist. Okay, and this also includes the Israelis. So again, Edom is the Caucasians and the Israeli nation, right? The Caucasian race is the nation of Edom. Okay, and this is their king, who has these subliminal messages in his portraits, and they do shit like this because why? Well, because they're witches. This is Genesis 27-38. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. So the fact that these Edomites are ruling now at this time in human history is not a coincidence. It tells us in the book of Daniel that there's going to be 5 empires that rule over the world from the time when the Lord gave the king of Babylon that vision which Daniel interpreted. Well, the last empire was a mystery. Nobody at the time of Daniel understood what this fifth empire or fifth beast would be, right? Other than that it would be connected to the fourth beast, which didn't die but lived. Well, we now know that the fourth beast was Rome, that didn't die. It went through a transformation, right, and came back after 1,000 years. Because again, remember, around 200 or 400 AD, after Rome had taken in the Hebrew Israelite slaves into the slave markets around 70 AD, they stayed there for over 100 years, working up, being servants, being freed, working their way up within society, and eventually from 200 to 400, and even before that actually, because there were Israelites living in Rome, right? All you got to do to prove that is read the book of Maccabees when the southern kingdom sent Israelite ambassadors to Rome for assistance against the Greeks and the Seleucid Empire, right? The Iranian Empire ruled by the Edomites, right, after Alexander's reign. Well, the Israelites who had now been living in Rome, they eventually rose up, took over, and the Edomite Romans eventually fled north, and they stayed in the Caucasus Mountains for about 1,000 years, right? The Khazarians came out before that, right, and they dwelt there in the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains, in the land known as Khazaria, modern day Ukraine. And then later the rest of the Edomite nation or tribes came out and came into Europe, and from their rising in power, right, which you could watch the show Medici's, the Borgia, and you can see how the Edomites came up within society and eventually took over. Well, this guy here, he is ultimately one of these Edomites that took over, right? After the Israelites had taken over Rome and had ultimately ruled all of Europe up until the Renaissance, these Edomites had came out of the Caucasus Mountains, came up in society through marriages, unrighteous dealings. They eventually took over. And this guy's lineage here, when you get into his great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, she was the last line or bloodline of the Israelite rulership, right, or the so-called black rulership of Europe. Okay, she married a so-called German Edomite, and his name was Albert, and his lineage goes back to these Edomites. Okay, and this is why these Edomites now are ruling, and this is how back in the time of the Renaissance, the empire was translated from one people to another. Those people being the Edomites, who we just read, their blessing was given to them by their father. Now let's go and read on, right? Because again, remember, by this time in the Bible, Isaac had already given the blessing for rulership and salvation to the younger brother, Jacob. Now Esau came in, seeing that that Jacob had taken the blessing, because all by the will of the Lord. And so he asked his father Isaac to bless him too. And this is the blessing that Esau and his descendants would get, which they're now living the last parts of this blessing. Verse 39. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. So this here is all why these Edomites, these Caucasians, rule the world. They live in the nicest places, and they always tend to be the leaders when it comes to any organization that has anything to do with rulership around the world. Okay, though they like to push up a lot of token leaders, they're the ones making the calls in the background, right? They're the ones that own the banks. They're the ones that own the government. They're the ones that hire all these mayors, governors, presidents, CEOs to be the face of their organization. A good example of this is Google. They have an Elamite, a so-called East Indian, as a CEO of the company, but it's two Amalekites running it, or that started it. And really, it's a propaganda wing of Esau's system. It says, this is Job 9:24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So Job, seeing that the earth was given into the hands of these Edomites, right? And he even tells us that these Edomites, that they would cover the faces of the true rulers of the world. Okay, this is why when you go back during the time of the Renaissance, you see a lot of history was modified, paintings were painted over, and you had a lot of whitewashing of the biblical saints and biblical characters. So that way these Edomites can paint themselves into the Holy Bible and hence, become the new image of the Messiah and God. And this is how their rulership has been established by lies and deceit. This is Proverbs 29:2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. And it's obvious what's going on right now, right? It's obvious who's in charge. These are not the righteous people. These are not the chosen people of the Lord that they claim to be. Okay? Because you got the Israelis right now saying that they're the chosen people, right? But wars are breaking out. They're committing atrocities. And then you got the English people, right? The crown saying that they descend from the house of David and whatnot, and how it's the European diaspora that shows that the 10 tribes went up to Europe, which is total BS. It's not biblical at all. There's no proof in the Bible. And also that historic heritage is not from the current bloodline that sits on the throne of England now. That was from the bloodline of Queen Victoria, and before that, all the way back to King James, all the way back to Constantine the Great, right? Those were all Israelites or Judites, Judeans, I should say, right? So-called Negroes, that their lineage truly did trace all the way back to King David. Okay, so those devils like to lie, and they omit a lot of the truth. It says, this is 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And that's what's happening, right? Right now, the son of perdition is being revealed, and people are starting to know who really rules the world, right? You just had, what is that famous, Irish boxer? He's always talking about God or whatnot, but apparently today his father called out an Amalekite, because the Amalekite was trying to sympathize with him or whatnot, saying that he knows what it is to be oppressed. He's Jewish, and then the dad's all, yeah, but you guys rule the world, don't you? And it was funny, right? Because the Jewish guy couldn't say shit, because again, what's happening? Because they are being revealed. Their magic of hiding themselves to make themselves seem humble, and that they're of no importance is gone away. And these devils, they can't hide the fact that they're the true rulers of the world right now. Well, like I said, this is all biblical, and it's all by the Lord's will. So either way, Alkim, just wanted to show you this video. Thought that was an interesting reveal by the King of England to have so many spiritual ties to his ancestral bloodline, which he knows that he's an Edomite. People have come out and said that the elites understand that they're related to Cain. So either way, Akim, hopefully this video was edifying. Until next time, I want to give all honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yashai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Shalom.